Without wasting any time, as promised, we have a session on how artificial intelligence can facilitate the development of smart cities. Now, this is one topic everybody has been looking forward to since yesterday, and we are going to mostly be elaborating on how AI can efficiently handle the large quantities of big data and generate predictions and solutions for the development of smart city program. Now, to moderate this session, we have amongst us this morning Mr. Ashish Srivastava, who is the head of AI and digital programs at CSTEP. I'd like to invite you on the dais and request all of you to please join me in welcoming him with a round of applause. Mr. Ashish Srivastava from CSTEP. We have Mr. Mohan Pradeep Sharma from the JP Schools. He's a former UNESCO teacher trainer, Deputy National Director, SOS India, and Senior VP at JP Schools. So requesting Mr. Mohan Pradeep Sharma, sir, please join us, and requesting all of you to please welcome him. Dr. Sumit D. Chaudhary, Chairman of Gaia Smart Cities, and Dr. Pavan Duggal, who is the founder and owner at Pavan Duggal Associates and head of Artificial Intelligence Law Hub, also an advocate at the Supreme Court of India. An esteemed panel we have this morning to elaborate and share with us their expertise and point of view on how artificial intelligence can facilitate the development of smart cities.
Thank you very much for the introduction. And before that, thank you, Raj, for a good setting up of the context for today. And when I was hearing to your reflections on yesterday's session, so who we are, the philosophical question, and also a brief about the AI, I was just wondering, and when I was thinking about what we will cover in the smart city, because those are the fundamental questions that we sometimes ignore and do not ask ourselves enough in depth. I remember that I'm from IT world, corporate IT for almost 28 years before I switched to a social AI, which I'll explain later. But when I about 6-7 years, I got very interested in data privacy. And for a long time, I was struggling to figure out, and I know Mr. Duggal is here somewhere, he will add his comments on that what is privacy. And because everybody whom I was meeting that time, 6-7 years back, had his own views on privacy. And I got this very interesting book. It's by a eminent lawyer, a privacy lawyer, Daniel Solove, who's very famous in the US. And his 2010 book, now of course he has evolved that much further. He gave a very good taxonomy, very easily understandable. Look, when you talk of privacy, these are the 5 or 6 things that you should look for. And it is not necessary that each one of these things will be applicable to every aspect of privacy discourse. And I realized that, gosh, this is what we need for smart cities. This is what we need for that. We just do not have that kind of taxonomy which is available for us. So some of those kind of things we will explore in this particular session, and where we will talk about how we use big data, what are the safety, what are the privacy issues, what are the citizen issues, and what is the potential of AI in smart city. So without further ado, let me focus on my co-moderators. Mr. Mohan, let's start with a more generic question. And you come from a non-AI background, so I think the ideal guy to start with. How do you think can a common man adopt AI in their life, so that we will weave that into our discussion later on?
I think on the outset, I would like to thank Rajkumar ji, Alka ji for inviting me and the other panelists to this very important discussion on the AI, role of AI making cities smart. The other day, I come with an educational background. The other day, I was reading a book by Alvin Toffler. Alvin Toffler says the illiterate of this century will not be those who cannot read and write, will be those who cannot unlearn and relearn. So, referring to Rajkumar Sharma ji, that we need not fear of another brain which is there present around us, and the robots, which we may have to. That's the way forward. We need to learn this very clearly. And it's not only us. If we look around Delhi as a town, I recall when I landed into Delhi, it was 1958, I landed in. Delhi was a very small city, having taxi drivers hanging around, auto drivers hanging around. We could paddle around. But you hardly find today the taxi drivers have, one of my panelists, he was referring, we can't find taxi, yellow, black taxi. Everything has been monitored, run by the Ola or the other cabs which are there, Uber. Who are those people who are operating these Ola and Ubers? They're basically drivers. They come from where? Most of them from my state, Bihar. So a normal man, let's not fear if he can learn to be with the technology in the car, in the, and it's going to, you look at the warehouses, you look around anywhere. All these children who are going to grow tomorrow are going to say that at one time my father used to drive car. The cars will be self-driven. Alright? And there may be air taxi which is going from Delhi to Gurgaon, is not very far. So things are going to change. Equally in the security, day in, day out, you hear, when you hear the Indo-Pak relationship, you hear a role of a drone now, the drone arrangement will be formed. For sure, of course. Supply chain is going to affect, transport is going to affect. It's going to happen even in medical field. The detection of the severe diseases will be done by this. So I believe in days to come, we all have to learn to be a part of this robot. Rajkumar ji was very, clearly citing an example. I'm working very closely on inclusive education. We were working with children who are differently able. So we made a basketball team out of that. We made a wheelchair basketball team. These children have gone to Olympics. They have done absolutely fantastic. All that because AI is present. There is another brain which is supported. Take it that way that you're not alone. There is a machine which is there to support you, to help you. Instead, you feel threatened that there is another enemy which is, there's not an enemy, there's another friend with you. So take it that way. And I think I'm also an advocate of one thing which is slightly controversial, which can be debatable, is about the anthropology in digital world. When we compare ourselves with Singapore, I'm not saying that India is going to be I'm representing the NEP in the country, the National Education Policy, where all of you will be affected through your children or yourself. The NEP has made a huge provision for the AI to walk in. Coding, decoding will start at the class 3rd, 4th level. So that will become a part of the children. So for the forthcoming children, the challenge is much lesser because they will be oriented right from day one. Maybe we as elders have some kind of a fear. That fear is what? I'll tell you. It is not given by anybody else, our own children. If you have to go and buy a tablet or buy a mobile, your own children tell you, Papa, ये मत खरीदना, ये आप हैंडल नहीं कर पाओगे. उसको डर लगता है उसकी पोल पट्टी खुल जाए. Actually, trouble is that. Am I right or wrong? I think you're making some sense about it, that we need to be very friendly, and I think we have very learned people on the panel who can talk to us on technical areas, and I think that's a way forward for Delhi, Chennai. All cities are going to, in few years' time, say 2030, things will be very different because of all that AI is going to be. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dr. Mohan. I think I'll move to Dr. Sumit. With your perspective, I think you have a more technical viewpoint. Can you just weave together what, in your point of view, can be the contribution of AI in building automated systems, bringing the efficiencies and benefiting the smart cities?
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about from a smart cities perspective, because that is what the session was about, without digressing. So if you take a look at the last 6-7 years across the world, there are probably 5,000 odd cities which are implementing all kinds of technologies for making cities smart. So first of this, there are two words: what is city and what is smart. So smart, in my definition, and so is accepted by many other people also in that same context, is smart are things that are learning. You can make a good design or you can make a smart design. A good design is a good design. Things, people are using it and they are, but it is not learning. It is not changing itself over time. A smart city is a city that has put systems in place to improve the quality of life continuously all the time. It may not be the smartest city today, but it has got a process to make itself smart. It is measuring the amount of light it is consuming, or power or energy it is consuming. It is measuring the amount of time that people are traveling on the bus. It is measuring the amount of water it is consuming. It is measuring the quality of water it is there. It is measuring the amount of greenery that is there. It is measuring the amount of water bodies that is there. They are measuring everything, and they are putting in place projects to improve those metrics, the KPIs of the city. That's a smart city. A city where the entire population and the commissioner and all the politicians and all the people have come together and said, we will improve our quality of life. We will do things that impact our lives. That is what a smart city is. It is not the city that is spending most amount of money in implementing command centers. It is not the city that has spent the most amount of money in smart city projects. I work in the smart city project, I get my money out of it, but I know what is happening across the country. There is, of all the cities that have implemented today, there is only one project that has got AI in it. I'm telling you, all the other ones are simple implementation of hardware or software systems to do things, to basically document things. Just because I put a traffic management system doesn't mean I'm using AI to manage traffic. I'm using a traffic. Let's take traffic and I'll explain how AI comes into it. And traffic is a huge part of our life, isn't it? We spend a lot of time sitting in traffic and we say, is there a better way to manage this? Can computer systems help? Absolutely. Earlier, there was no traffic lights. Then they said, okay, let's put traffic lights. Then they said, okay, let's put timer on the traffic light. So 4 minutes, 3 minutes, that's the basic. The timer is installed in the light itself. It switches on, switches off after some time. Is that AI? No. Then somebody said, no, I keep on getting red lights everywhere. Let's coordinate the traffic lights. So clock 1 and clock 2 and clock 3 of 4 traffic lights, 10 traffic lights, 20 traffic lights, they all get coordinated. Is that AI? That's also not AI. It's coordinated traffic lights. Been going on for 30 years now. 40 years, coordinated traffic lights. Then somebody said, let's put some more intelligence into the system. So they said, let's measure the number of cars which are there in the queue and change the time that I'm telling the traffic light to change. So it has put sensors on the road which is saying there are 20 cars waiting, so let's wait for 2 minutes. If 40 cars are waiting, then let's open the green light for a little longer. So some thinking is happening at the traffic light which is getting its thinking, the information from a sensor. Sensors are there to expand the capacity of our human perception. Otherwise, some human has said, na, ki 3 minutes open karo, 2 minutes band karo. That human is not there watching the traffic anymore. Now you say that let's enhance the capacity of the human and change it dynamically. Is that AI? Is that AI or not? Is this intelligent traffic management or not? It is the first step towards intelligent, where you are saying, I'm going to enhance the capacity of human thinking by putting sensors, and getting the sensors I'm going to, but it is still not smart, it is not learning, it is seeing and doing, seeing and doing. मुझे ये दिखा, मैं change कर दिया. When you start implementing AI, you are saying that in the morning, over the last 3 months of my watching this traffic light, I have seen that this is the trend that happens over here. In January, February, March, this is the trend. In April, May, June, this is the trend. Somebody has analyzed all that data and saying today on Thursday afternoon, I will do only 3 minutes 14 seconds. But at Thursday evening, when the traffic is going more, I will change it. It is constantly dynamically changing the algorithm to implement a complex algorithm such that you reach home faster. Objective over here is not managing traffic, it is to make sure you reach home faster. That is what smart cities were about, to improve your quality of life so that you reach home faster and eat your wife's food or restaurant food or Zomato food or whatever, or husband's food, being completely neutral in that regard. I cook, so. So essentially when you look at AI, implementation of AI in smart cities today, the implementation is only on 2 things. One is facial recognition and number plate recognition. Everything else is implementation of hardware to just put the first step towards infrastructure, which will eventually make us smart. Was this project, these set of projects required to make our city smart? Absolutely. Now we know every government department is measuring everything, quality of water. Everybody is putting Jal Jeevan Mission. You take, everybody has got systems today which is measuring. They also know that that is not enough. They also know that with that policy decision, data-driven policy decision is required. That is where humans come in. Earlier humans used to take decisions from a gut feeling. ऐसा ही होता है, 4 बजे इतना ही होता है. Now they have data. And this data-driven decision making, data-driven governance is what we are heading towards across the country, and that is what smart cities is going to do, improve your healthcare, including your quality of air. If you didn't know what your quality of air was, how would you improve the quality of air? If you didn't know what is the quality of water, how would you improve the quality of water? So the first thing about improvement is, do you know where you are today? So smart city projects right from day one of the mission was to measure your current state of affairs. The 100 cities that were chosen were given a list of KPIs that they needed to meet, including how much have they paid their teachers or have they paid their teachers on time. That was a KPI, by the way. It is important for cities to first take those things into account. And only those cities which could prove that they have taken care of all those X number of, I don't know exactly how many KPIs were asked for, were chosen in the 100. And you'll be surprised to know cities like Bangalore did not make it to that list, the initial cut. Got nothing to do with politics. It's just that they didn't have the KPIs to measure and prove that they were doing something right. And over time, we have seen that cities have put all these structures in place. They are not there yet, but we know that I am a consultant to the city of Agra, Jaipur, Aurangabad, Lucknow. I've done work across the country in putting these structures in place for various cities, and I can tell you that the implementation of systems comes first. Implementation of AI will come after. Now, where will it help? AI will help. I'm taking too long, is it, or is it I'm in the flow? I'll just finish up my. So AI, measuring power is not AI. Predicting, by knowing what it takes to, how much capacity should I build in the next 20 years, that is AI. Neural networks is another way of deep learning where you're basically saying, I don't know how to explain it, but I can predict what is going to happen because systems are there today to do deep learning on all of these things. And that was my BTech project from IIT when I was there 30 years ago almost. And people were doing these kinds of things, but they are becoming a lot more affordable now. They are getting embedded in small chips, and people are being able to deploy them in every nook and cranny of your life, from traffic lights to your food preparation to measurement of all kinds of quality things. So essentially smart cities and AI is here to stay. A lot of technologies are being built. They are not a lot of them are not affordable yet for wide scale deployment in any country. Forget about India. Let me tell you that we are not too far back in the implementation of some of these technologies. I work with various organizations in Europe as well. They have similar challenges as we have in terms of budgets for implementing large scale projects, in terms of they appear sophisticated, but at the fundamental level their problems are identical in terms of rollout of large-scale technology for benefit. They are starting at a different level, and they are trying to reach a different level. But we are
So
having the
let's
same.
Come back on this one and take this, because I'm also wanting to hear Mr. Duggal's point of view.
Agency or an actor. But I can't send it to jail. Whom do I send to jail? It has to be the person behind the AI who has to be sent to jail. Which means the creator of the artificial intelligence algorithm will be the most fundamental element who will have to be addressed vis-a-vis liability. And it's not that usage of AI will be all hunky-dory and it will be all smooth as silk. It's not going to happen. It's like a learning experience. As and when we are using AI in different functions of smart cities, we are bound to find a lot of legal framework issues. As of now, as of what? End of September 2021, when I talk with you, the only tools that India currently has is the Information Technology Act, where artificial intelligence can at best be brought under the broad definition of a computer. And that being so, then come the fundamental issues. Who's going to make artificial intelligence more secure? Because AI is now becoming both a friend and a foe. AI is being used both for committing cyber crimes and cybersecurity breaches, and also for regulating cybercrime and for preventing cybersecurity breaches. No wonder when I go to the darknet, I find a number of these new websites. And these websites are advertising their cybercrime as a service powered by artificial intelligence. So AI is now being used by the darknet players for the purposes of delivering cybercrime as a service. That will have to be appropriately regulated. I think a lot of work needs to be done. And as I believe each of the Indian smart cities get into fruition and a ground reality, and as we increasingly start focusing on AI, we will have to start developing the legal frameworks and principles concerning the same. One option is that let's reinvent the wheel. I don't believe in that. I believe it's best to identify what's been done globally and then customize them. Mere cut and paste would not really help. So let's examine what has been developed by the European Union. Let's look at the kind of practical experience of states like Illinois in the United States of America, and then come up with our own customized approach on what and how AI should be legally regulated. That I think has to be topmost priority, and ultimately humans must also be straddled with duties vis-a-vis AI. It's not that I'm going to push this button and AI is going to come into effect. No, it takes a lot of time, effort, energy, a lot of big data sets. Now, somewhere down the line, this AI becomes a very fertile target for cyber criminals. And coming of COVID-19, we've already seen the golden age of cybercrime emerging. Cybercrime has been with us since the advent of the internet, 50 years back. But the last 1.5 years, the kind of phenomenal growth in cybercrime, its manifestations, its avatars, its economic impact is mind-boggling. The last year, 2020, we just, as a world, only lost $6 trillion thanks to cybercrime. That's not enough. This year, by the end of 2021, we are expected to lose more than $8 trillion thanks to cybercrime. And that is constantly going to grow up. Next year, it's going to be more than $10 trillion US dollars. So in a scenario like this, it's but natural to expect that the cyber security of AI algorithms is going to be constantly breached by state, non-state actors, by cyber criminals and the like. And therefore, a lot of focus will have to be done on how the cyber security of AI algorithms can be effectively protected and preserved, and what kind of responsibility vis-a-vis cyber security needs to be specifically given to the human actors who are behind the development and the further effective functioning of AI. Those are some fundamental questions that I think are currently arising. A lot of work needs to be done, but I think it's a very exciting moment that we've actually begun our journey. The very fact is, there's an old Indian saying, "Jahan se jago, wahin se savera samjho." I think let's wake up from now. Let's consider this as the morning of our day, and let's start working on how we can shall I say, in a constructive manner, go ahead and legally enable AI. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Pawan. I think that was a very, very, very motivating thoughts about AI, the challenges. And I agree, I will give some perspective on some of the things and bring it also back to the smart city discourse, also whatever Pawan had just mentioned and earlier other two participants also mentioned. So I think the accountability and liability of AI has been debated, and I think, as Pawan pointed out, the jury is still out on it in terms of, and that's an important part, because what happens if some kind of big prediction which has an impact on the life of people, what if the traffic signal misbehaves in such a fashion that there is a massive accident? Then who is to be blamed? I think those are the things that have to be taken care of. And I do agree, and while yes, India has been a shade behind in terms of it, but I think you will find that some of these problems have not been cracked anywhere in a very fruitful way. So I think we should not also feel so bad that no, we are completely behind. A lot of things. Look at the GDPR, which is the privacy laws. They also matured to a reasonably good extent only first when the draft came out in, I think, 2018 or 19, European GDPR, and when they nailed it down in 2021. That's when we got the first hang of what an end-to-end privacy laws, and they have a big bearing on how artificial intelligence also has to play with the data. So that is one perspective, just as a closing remark on Pawan. But I think it's also very important that the point that I was making right at the beginning, that we use AI in a very generic sense, okay? And I think it is high time that the normal people start realizing that AI is not one technology. AI is not meant to do only one kind of thing. AI is also not just about learning, because machine learning is a subset of AI. AI can do plenty of things. So even if you look at the use cases, they form in the categories of personalization, optimization, detection, prediction, so on and so forth. That means AI is basically behaving like a human intelligence, or attempting to behave like a human intelligence and trying to do something with it. It's not necessary all the time that it has to be prediction. It can be something. For example, these days, I am part of a study where we are looking at AI application with use cases and the potential from India perspective on the climate perspective. And a lot of them are very, very relevant for smart cities. Take the example of water resource management. Every big city, every metro is having a problem. The place where I come from, it is a big problem in Bangalore. Chennai, I know, is suffering because of that. Delhi has its own problem, NCR region by and large. So I think AI has demonstrated a visible benefit in terms of being ability to, first of all, optimize the water consumption. How to manage the water table. If you don't know how much the water table is and how it is getting depleted and exploited, you can't manage it. How to detect, without the needs of too many sensors, where is a possibility of a leak happening, so that you can take upfront action. So you can be an autonomous, you can close the valves and actually avoid the water spill to be happening. Same thing in grid management. Smart grids are being talked about. Smart grids are on the anvil, but I think there is no good way of demand planning and supply management in smart grid. Even India, who was so far leading ahead in the climate talks, because we were going fast forward in renewable energy, solar energy, etc., have started falling behind. Now AI has a big role to play in terms of detecting and predicting how much solar power generation capacity a smart city has. We in Bangalore did an analysis of all the rooftops of all the government buildings, and created a model that if the solar panels are adopted and AI was used plenty in that one, in that whole modeling, in how much likelihood of solar power generation is possible in a city, thereby actually reducing the dependence on thermal energy and other non-climate friendly kind of sources. So potential is immense, but as Sumit had earlier pointed out, we are at the stage one of end stage. We are just about getting the data right, we are just about getting the systems right, and then I think from step by step we hope that we might be able to reach somewhere where everything is smart and things are happening one way or the other in a way that it is beneficial for the people. Now, one thing which I will come back to all the things for a very quick response. In this, what in the social science we call it the quad helix. When we talk of smart cities, also we talk about that there are always 4 sets of stakeholders which have to work together in making a smart city technology work. Okay, this is the government, of course, the academia, because a lot of research is happening there, the industry, a lot of corporates who are very much deeply embedded into the important stakeholders in creating smart city technologies, and last but not the least is the citizen. Where does it leave him? How much in our solutions are we factoring a citizen's perspective? And that's where I think what Pawan also mentioned in terms of legal accountability, or Sumit mentioned about traffic cameras. Does it amount for surveillance? Is it the right thing to do? Whose consent has been taken? That yes, we can, even if it is for the obvious betterment, because that is always a two-way fight, whether if something is for betterment, seemingly for some crime or traffic, then is it okay to take photographs outside somebody's house because there is a red light there that I will monitor the traffic? Is that correct? Is the data which is in healthcare sector, is it okay to share with the insurance companies because of something? So how do we take care that all the AI solutions that we are developing have the perspective? And Pawan also pointed out, by the way, of the bias, okay? And as we increasingly go towards more and more AI solutions, how do we ensure that there is no bias between two options that are there? And that is always the case. So I think I just made a few points, and I will just quickly take your perspective, Sumit, first, and then your thing also, Mohan, in terms of where do you see citizens' role into an AI solution in smart city context? Okay, so that, because we have now discussed a lot of broader themes.
So first part of the citizen involvement is the citizen should say what his problems are, and that was done across all the cities in India today. There were about 2 million people across the country told people about the problem, and traffic and water and all of those things became. So the involvement of the citizen to determine what was their nature of problem. Every city has a slightly different problem statement. It might be traffic in Bangalore, it could be water in some place, sanitation and sewage in some other city. So involving them in identifying problem is the first thing. Because before it was not happening. Before, some IAS officer or some politicians would say that I need a flyover over here or a bridge over there, and that got built. Now citizens are getting involved in determining what should be or should not be done in their neighborhood, and each neighborhood can have a say in their life. Second is their willingness to participate in giving feedback about everything. I work in the Swachh Bharat mission, in which we have installed machines in more than 150 cities today across 8 different states, and other companies have done in other states as well, where we are getting feedback from public toilets every day for the last 4 years since the beginning of the thing. And every day more than 1 lakh and 1.5 lakh pieces of feedback is coming. And from that feedback, we are paying the contractors. From that feedback, we are determining. So the people are giving that feedback. That means they are getting involved in their own lives. I think that is the thing is the government is trying to get people involved, and cities which have done it are very good in their quality of life, Indore being one of them, and I really appreciate what they have done in involving the citizen in almost every aspect of the growth of the city.
When you have anything to add?
I think while we are talking about the role of an individual, I see it from the education point of view. I think Dugalji has pointed out that we have lost how many $1 trillion, and how the miscreants have become hyperactive in cyber crimes is all because there is sizable ignorance available among the individuals who are there on the digital world. So the education of the individuals is very important, so that they learn to be with another brain which is working alongside. So far we've been working, of course, with the brains which were more human in nature, with also the value system attached. If I talk about my dealing with Dugalji, or my dealing with the AI intelligence, which may not have that kind of a value system because it does not have roots Its roots are only in the science and technology. So the departure, because of the repetitive system which is handed over by the Britishers to us, has prevailed for a long time. It's the first policy which is talking about the knowledge-based society. Since I am attached with the NEP, let me tell you, the core of this mission of new policy, the first government could have it there in 75 years to come out its own policy. Otherwise, we were governed by all 99%, 90%. We talk about, learning as experience has never been measured. What is going to come as an educationist, I can tell you. Assessment as learning has never done. All our brain bracts are basically our net result of RATA. Never their experiences. They are only a paper tiger, they are only a... Dugalji rightly talked about cognitive fitness. The role of cognitive fitness is going to be very, very crucial in days to come. As we do a lot of exercise for the physical fitness, similarly, we may have to also, the danger of, Dugalji talked about it, and I think Sumit has talked about the systems in place. We are still in, let me tell you, we are in a very infancy stage. We are at the learning stage. And let us not compare with the other countries. Let us find out solution within the country. Let us make this country as Atmanirbhar country, as and put our own. Modi ji rightly points out that mera Vishwas bhi aur mera prayas bhi. That is what is going to count for tomorrow's India. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Mohan. I think that was almost sounded like a closing statement, so you made my job easy. But I know I'm also run out of time, so I'll just make one point, because we didn't discuss too much technology, and I don't think we have time to discuss it in detail. But I think the technology is moving faster than both the legal aspect as well as the solution ability to build solutions around those technologies. I think the technology is moving fast. So I think when I was talking about the grid computing, it's not just about machine learning, the multi-agent theory, the genetics algorithms, they are reaching newer heights. Even in the sensor data, how to ensure privacy while having thousands of sensors all over the city, capturing all amount of data. The new aspects, the newer versions of fog computing, which is one of the new architecture, sensor network architecture. How the data which is captured and what the data that is passed on and aggregated are completely delineated. So you will never know about any person or an individual in completeness. So I think a lot of things are happening around the technology to make the life more easy and more compliant in terms of legal terms, and also the AI technology itself is moving extremely fast, whether, as Sumit pointed out, traffic, water, waste, everything. So I think we have a lot of hopeful days to still see. These are early days, and I think thanks a lot for your engagement and listening, and thanks a lot to my fellow moderators.
Thank you.
Any questions from anybody? I will be happy with my colleagues and friends. I think there is somebody who will come to you. Yes.
Yeah, my name is Nishant. I am the CEO and CTO of DeepSight ALM. I have a question that we are seeing that a lot of requirement on the smart cities floating around. But my straight question is that how many use cases is already implemented? Because what I am seeing that there are a lot of use cases are there, but there are various challenges are there in order to implement, and so I just want that what are the use cases already implemented?
A lot of RFPs get written and they mention that you need to have an AI algorithm behind it, but nobody has been able to prove whether AI is working over there or simple rule-based decision making. That is not AI. Just if this happens, do that. That is just a simple software program. AI, true AI, is being used in a couple of smart city use cases right now. One is number plate recognition, mostly to do with vision and image processing and video processing. That is where most of the AI is really implemented today. In Maharashtra or in Mumbai today, you cannot give a traffic challan without an accompanying picture from a camera. You cannot give. So no police can give you a challan by stopping you unless he has documented proof from his mobile phone or from a traffic camera somewhere. That means people have already moved and accepted that you are. So it was good for the people, as you were asking whether people are accepted. It is actually good because you are not getting random tickets. There is accompanying proof that you committed the violation. So facial recognition is helping both security aspects and then vehicle detection and NPR and speed recording is making you safe as a citizen. These are the two places where we are seeing active deployment of technology. But is it being used in many other places? Yes, power grids, a lot of companies, not state governments or governments, but a lot of companies are using it for prediction of load. Those are all predictive algorithms, but they are still algorithms. They are not necessarily AI, but they are deep learning subset of an AI concept being used there to understand what is going to happen next, given all the data that you have got in the past. So a lot of deep learning is being used for voice recognition. Voice-based algorithms are being there. So video and voice-based algorithms and data which cannot be classified. That is where we are seeing implementation.
So, sir, what is the point I want to make that there are, that this facial recognition and NPR is a very vanilla solution in AI field actually. A lot of companies are working on it. But when you talk about a smart city, there could be a various use cases. Like if ambulance detection, automatic by the siren, it will automatically detect. A lot of things can be done, and where we am seeing that there are a lot of things on the RFP, but on the as Ashish ji told that there could be a multiple collaboration and multiple stakeholders should play a big role, like government agencies, smart city stakeholders, citizens and all. Where I see that the lacking point is that the decision makers is not full-heartedly accepting this solution, and even they know that this is a right solution, there is a right price, but their mindset is a problem that they don't want to go ahead for it. So even there are a lot of RFPs are floating, but on the use case, it's just a vanilla solution FR and.
I think we are both agreeing on that, right?
Yeah,
so I'm also saying that lots of RFPs are there. It is not getting implemented or getting implemented without use.
So that is the thing. So a startup, when a startup is going to build it, AI development time is very high. So they need some confidence from government and a stakeholder that okay.
But Nishant, I think let us also accept, while the point is valid and all of us are in agreement, the fact is that we are at an early stage of identifying the right use cases and building the right foundations for those systems. For example, in Karnataka, where I was involved a little bit more in smart cities, lot of the water networks, supply networks are being converted into SCADA networks, with proper planning, because once that is done, you will have the ability of building various predictive models, detection models, maintenance models on top of it. So pretty much in every place we are still there. And while government, you say that, but government is this is government. We are in various forums, various capacities are consultants to the government. I think in general, as a society at large, as a technology society at large, we are at an early stage. We have to accept that. But is the foundational work not happening? I will tend to disagree a little bit, and I say that is happening. But actual use cases, have they emerged, implemented? I think we are way off. I think that's the
What is my suggestion is there should be a closed door meeting between all the stakeholders and startups and the government agency, where we can sit together and out of 100 use cases we can identify 5 top use cases, and a startup can build, and there should be a certification program from the government who can certify it, those things, and then people will start working on it.
All of that is there already from the Startup India, and all of that is happening. Lots of use cases. I am there. I am a startup also. Though we have been there for 6 years, but I am part of many of those. But the government does not know how to buy innovation. So if anybody who's in the government, please take that as my feedback.
But
they cannot buy it.
Is valid.
Yeah.
The suggestion is valid.
But they are already doing it, is what I'm saying.
I think we have only a few minutes. You also had a question.
This may not be a question, but I have 2 points that I want to put it in front of the honorable.
You can sit and talk. The microphone will then pick up your question.
See, first of all, if you talk about that's fine. If you talk about a smart city, the cities are getting smarter, but the agencies that carries out the work. See, suppose if we we talked about traffic, we talked about the water, the electricity, the engineers who does actual work in the project, they're all old college graduates. They need to be trained. Then only the program will be successful. You see, because I have seen, I am from Sikkim, I have seen, see, in two of our town, we have this smart city projects, beautiful, not functioning properly. Because the engineers also does not know how to function it properly. So wastage of money. Dr. Pawan Dugal said so many things which are eye-opening for us and for the future generation about dark web, how that's actually earning money, and how the rich people and wealthy people are getting into the crime, cyber crime. As I think Dr. Pawan rightly said, by 2062, 40 years from now, artificial intelligence will take over the human intelligence. Sir Mohan, you are in the National Education Policy. I would request you, whenever you get chance to put this in the point to the government. See, I am an educator. I run a school. I have schools in Sikkim. All of us are from the school. So much of very weighty responsibility on our shoulder I feel right now, because 40 years from now, either our future generation will be doomed, or we all come together. Schools from primary level itself, National Education Policy also has to focus on educating our children right from the school level, so that we create healthy society. This is my
fair point.
Thank you.
Very fair point. I think I quite agree. The government has already initiated, coding, decoding from class 3 and 4 level. And also let us understand one thing, we are over ambitious. This country after 75 years could have now foundational literacy and numeracy policy in place. All those of us who have become very big engineers have escaped that. So it will be in place, I think. Let us be.
I think there is one gentleman. I know we are run far out of time, but he has been holding for some time. Can
Thanks,
you please,
Mr. Srivastava.
and this is the last question we'll take.
My question is very straightforward to Mr. Pawan Dugal. Mr. Dugal, thanks for giving a very insightful thing on AI from a legal point of view, and as well as frightening also. So my question is, since AI and other emerging technologies, they are going to take over maybe in next few decades. So do you think there is an effect upon the fundamental rights in particular, and on Constitution in general?
Thank you, sir, for that fantastic question. Actually, we tend to take a lot of things for granted. We are humans, so our human rights are taken for granted, and our expectation that our constitutional rights will also be there for all times to come are also taken for granted. But if AI comes in, it could have a serious impact upon my fundamental right to life, my right to privacy, my even right to freedom of speech and expression. For example, let me give you a very primitive example. We have these IoT devices at home, the Alexas, the Echos of the world. People are buying them for 8,000-10,000 rupees. But these devices are listening to you on a 24/7 basis. And this entire recording goes to locations outside the territorial boundaries of the country. And then who listens is anybody's question. Now consider a more advanced example. If AI is listening to you all the time, is that a violation of your fundamental right to privacy? I'm very, very clear it is. Why? Because as humans, we have some expectation of a private space. Similarly, if AI is going to take decisions on our behalf as humans, somewhere down the line, our ability to give effective decisions could prejudicially be impacted. So there could be a massive impact of AI on normal rights, upon fundamental rights, upon legal rights. However, how that will actually pan up will depend upon how quickly the AI adoption gets taken place in various stuff. So the moment the state actors start adopting AI at an institutional level, that's why they will have to start considering the impact of AI on these human rights. And I think the legal jurisprudence has to evolve. We in Delhi have created the New Delhi Artificial Intelligence Law Hub, where we are now working on these legal principles concerning regulation of AI. That look, AI is so far so good, but there has to be a Lakshman Rekha that needs to be drawn. Now, what's that Lakshman Rekha? Who's going to draw it and who's going to implement it is something that can only be done by processes of law, and for that legal principles have to evolve. I think artificial intelligence law as a sub-discipline of cyber law is evolving very quickly, and that should hold answers to a lot of questions, sir, that you've raised. Thank you, sir.
Thanks a lot, Pawan. And with that, we close today's session. Thank you all. Thanks all of you. Thanks all of you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Well, thank you very much. It was indeed a very interesting and thought-provoking session, and we'd like to thank each one of you. Sir, I'll request you to kindly stay back for just a moment. I'm going to request Mr. Rajkumar Sharma to please present these little mementos we have as a token of our appreciation and gratitude to each one of our speakers, starting with Mr. Ashish Srivastav, with Mr. Mohan Pradeep Sharma, former UNESCO teacher trainer, also Director SOS India, Senior VP JP Schools, to Dr. Sumit D. Chaudhary after that. And this is a green certificate, basically a plant adoption certificate that a plant has been adopted in your name by ICRA. To Dr. Sumit Chaudhary. One to Mr. Ashish Srivastav. And last but not the least, Dr. Pawan Duggal. Thank you for sharing with us your thoughts and insights. And may I also request you gentlemen to come forward for a group photograph, a very quick group photograph for this session on how artificial intelligence can facilitate the development of smart cities. And post this session, we are going to move on to our next session, which is another very interesting discussion on the road to artificial intelligence in mobility. The smart moves that are required, the user-friendly and easily accessible transportation is what we call smart mobility. Now, artificial intelligence helps to identify, predict and solve mobility challenges, and that's what we are going to be elaborating on in our next session. I'm going to request all of you to please put your hands together and join me in welcoming our first speaker, Shri Sudhendu J. Sinha, Advisor, Infrastructure, Connectivity, Transport and Electric Mobility with Niti Aayog. I am going to request you all to please put your hands together and welcome him. Shri Sudhendu J. Sinha. Shri Sinha, I'll request you to please join us on days. Mr. Akhilesh Srivastav, Expert, New Mobility and Road Safety 2.0 at the World Economic Forum, will also be sharing with us his expertise in this session. Welcome, Mr. Srivastav. Mr. Sudhakaran Srambikal, who is the CEO and co-founder at Q Gates Technologies, also on this panel in this session. Mr. Prashant N. Deshpande, Vice President and CTO at STFC. And to moderate the session, we have amongst us Mr. Sanjeev Bakshi, who is the Vice President, SAP Labs. And I welcome you all. Requesting everyone to please be seated. This is another very interesting session on mobility and the role of AI in facilitating mobility. So without any ado, Mr. Prashant Deshpande, if he's here. Okay, so I'll leave it to you, Mr. Bakshi, to take the session forward from here. Thank you.
Good afternoon all. So I think I'm audible enough. So how we'll go is I'll speak a few words, then over to the esteemed panels. For first, there are some questions from you. We'll go to the questions so that you know your questions are getting answered, and then subsequently we'll have it open for each panel to speak something more beyond the questions. So with this, I'll just begin, and I'll just give you a little bit about what is happening in AI. And then obviously the experts next to me will further substantiate that. So to begin with, let me give you some facts. I don't know whether you are aware or not, but AI will be 13 trillion, and I mean it, trillion, 13 trillion US dollars. It'll add that much to the economic GDP, the economic output, by 2030. And a lot of this will be in mobility. And I don't know whether you're aware or not, but 2021, despite the COVID, 75 billion USD has been funded in AI, and majority of it is mobility. And you'll be again surprised to know the majority of the investment happening in this space in AI mobility is by non-automotive companies. 97% of the investments are happening by non-automotive companies. So you can realize, does automotive even have a chance? Let's see. Then a research done says that by 2030, 1 in 4 cars will be autonomous driven. Let's see how it goes. A survey done by McKinsey on consumers across Germany, US, China, they found that consumers are ready to let AI enter into their homes. 75% of them were okay to have AI and robots do their household work. 47% of them were okay for driverless cars to ferry them and their families around. Now some bad news. The road traffic deaths per year, and mind you, this is underinflated because we know in case of India, a lot of these deaths are never reported. 1.5 million deaths a year are there worldwide, and majority of them are in poor and developing countries like India, and 90% of these fatalities are due to driver error. This could be drunken driving, this could be distracted driving, or this could be any such problem with the driver. And only 10% of these deaths are attributable to poor car or poor infrastructure. We hear a lot about carbon emissions and carbon credits, etc., etc. 25% of the carbon dioxide emissions are there due to transport, and this will double by 2050. So approximately 50% of the carbon dioxide emissions, if the things go the way they are going, will be there in 2050. Another aspect on logistics and mobility. Today, in poor countries, 25% of the cost of the GDP, the 25% of the GDP goes into logistics, whereas in developed countries it's only 7%. So you can see where there are inefficiencies into the system. And now, before we go to the panels, some interesting things. You might be wondering, the mobility is the future, but don't forget, the future is now. There are a lot of work going on worldwide in the area of mobility and AI. And we think normally, media attention is there a lot on autonomous driving. There's a lot on in-vehicle entertainment. You see all your new cars, all voice assist, emotion recognition, etc., etc. But this is jazzy. There's a lot more applications, which my esteemed panels will also tell you all, which goes beyond just personal transportation. I'll give some examples. You have it in railways, in aviation. You have applications in marine. You have applications in fleet management, yard management, in route optimization, maintenance, various sorts of maintenance. In aircraft crew management, even taking your ubiquitous Uber, sharing of the rides, so matching the driver with the ride, onboarding of the driver. Then all these things are already there. Now, coming to some interesting use cases which you might or might not be aware. Number one, I'll begin with our own company. We have, for the city of Nanjing, SAP has been managing their traffic control system and through our IoT and ML for city of Nanjing. And you'll be surprised to know how much reduction has already been achieved. Traveling time has reduced by 25%. Wait time has reduced by 40%. Stops have reduced by 30%. And emissions have come down by 20%. So this is just one example of one small city in China. Other areas where urban mobility is there. In Norway, Sweden and France, there are already autonomous buses operational. Ollie is